The past 6 years, my wife and I have been traveling around the world eating incredible food and just having the time of our lives. But I find that there's a lot of people that either don't have the chance to travel, or when they travel, they feel intimidated to make the food. So what I thought would be cool is to do a new series, which I call Legit vs. Budget, where I find the best food in the world and I show you how to make it super authentically. And then I show you how to do a budget version that anyone can make wherever you are in the world. So we're in Spain, so I figured we would start off with Paella is one of the most popular dishes in all of Spain, but there's a lot of folklore around it. There's a lot of like fear. A lot of people are kind of intimidated to make it. They assume they need this gigantic pot and a bajillion ingredients and it's going to be this whole thing. So I wanted to show you guys more traditional paella and then also more of a budget kind of like Josh version of paella that anyone can make. To me, this series is all about making food more accessible for anyone around the world and learning from amazing cultures and taking things into your own home and kind of figuring out how it works for you. For a brief history lesson, paella originally originated on the They would use a gigantic pot and they'd bring it out and they'd serve it right in the pot and everyone would have a wooden spoon and they would just eat it. And they would use local things like chicken, rosemary, saffron, and rice. And rice is the key element to this dish. Now what's fascinating about paella is when most people hear the word paella, as it was for me, I assume seafood. I assume it had like a million things and seafood. But traditionally it didn't. It had chicken, sometimes rabbit, and I'm going to be using both of those today, but rice is the key. So while paella has a more traditional method, and I'm not necessarily saying authentic because I think authentic can mean sort of whatever's authentic to you, to your parents making it, to your neighborhood, and your neighbor could have a totally different version. But more traditionally, paella had this short grain rice, and as it got more and more popular, rice spread all throughout Spain. So paella now kind of refers to about 200 different like generic rice. It's like kind of a generic name. When you hear paella, it just means like a rice dish. And there's like over 200 different rice dishes around Spain, but today I'm gonna be making more of a traditional, kind of where it started. Without further ado, let's get into the first and more traditional paella. So to make paella, there's some very specific things you need to make a traditional paella. Now, I could not find every single one of them. I got most of them. I also threw in a couple of my own little twists. At the end of the day, use whatever you got. So one of the number one things that makes it super legit is the rice. It's a short grain rice. This is actually arroz, which is rice in Spanish, and it's traditional paella rice. Now you can order this online, or you could of course use a short grain rice. I have a really good Spanish olive oil. Saffron is a key in this recipe, but saffron's also very expensive. If you can't find it, that's okay. But here's the thing. Even though it's really expensive, one of the most expensive things, like ingredients in the world, you only need such a tiny pinch that you can buy a lot of it and make this dish over and over again. Spanish smoked paprika, another key ingredient right here. If you can't get smoked, get regular. Garlic and onion, standard, tomatoes, these three you can find anywhere. Rosemary is a nice little way to add some extra flavor. So traditionally they use chicken and also sometimes rabbit. So I actually was able to find a little bit of rabbit. You can completely avoid that, but rabbit and chicken are kind of tend to be the main way. Typically there are different types of beans. They might have peas, broad beans, or lima beans. I was kind of struggling to find some of those things, so I ended up using some green beans, which I'm going to cut up and they'll be really nice in there. Lemon, they don't finish with lemon, but they'll serve it with lemon with you, especially in the seafood version, so you can squeeze it on if you want, optional. And then this, and this is freaking amazing. Now you could just use water, but I made a chicken stock and I ended up actually using chicken and the heads of the shrimp. So this is like super full of umami that's gonna mix with the rice and just make so much love in your mouth. So the first thing you wanna do is prep a couple ingredients, chop some things up, dice the onion, the garlic, and then it's just all done in one pot. You can't talk about paella unless you talk about the paella pan. Boom. So usually made of steel or carbon steel. They're very highly conductive. Traditionally they're cooked over fire, and I would love to do that, but I'm just going to be inside today. It's pretty cold outside. But you want a highly conductive metal because you want to make sure that you're able to like adjust the temperature very easily. You could use a cast iron if you don't have one. Just keep in mind it's going to hold a lot of heat, so things are going to get very hot and you of course don't want it to burn, or use whatever you got. But this is traditional. This is 15 inches. They get huge. They get like these giant ones because usually paella is like very festive, party, feed a ton of people. If you are just one person, that's okay. Don't be discouraged. You can make a giant dish and still just freeze it or make a smaller dish. It's going to get hot very fast, and I made the mistake of letting it get super hot, and it actually warped and kind of discolored a little bit, so just be careful about that. The first thing you want to do is just get it hot. Chicken and rabbit, I'm going to cook that down. You can add salt before, but I'm going to add some salt now. I actually kind of forgot, but not a big deal. Salt loves to come to the party whenever it's invited. The reason I'm using a wooden spatula, this would not be traditional. I'm actually using this for your enjoyment because if I was using metal, it would be so loud and annoying to hear this. The one thing I am up against, the fire source is kind of just like right here. So I'm gonna kind of be, not necessarily at first because I can move the food around, but when I actually get everything in there, I might be moving the paella pan around a bit. I'm gonna quickly show you guys this saffron up close and personal. Very light pinch, comes from a flower, and everyone is like hand-picked. I think that's why it's very expensive. So I'm actually gonna mix this into my cooking liquid. You could just mix it in a little bit of water. It's gonna turn beautiful golden. I'm gonna mix this into my cooking liquid, and then when it all dumps in, the saffron flavor will be infused. The meat is nicely brown. I'm gonna move it over to the side, Charlie Brown. What's cool about a paella pan is it's so freaking big. You can kind of move stuff to the side. It'll still cook. It's nicely brown. I'm using dark meat, which to me is extremely important because you could use, whatever meat you like, but just keep in mind that we're gonna be cooking this a lot and the meat has more fat, so you don't want it to burn. So, if you are gonna use like a white meat, just make sure that you're actually taking it out. Onions go in. Okay. Oh wow, yeah. Okay, now my onions are sweated down nicely. Slip in Mr. Garlic. Add him to the vacational party. Mix that around. Now let's go in with those green beans. Like the green. I like it, the green. And at this point, I'm just gonna go for it. The beans don't need long. Just wanna get them all Mr. Happy together. So one of the key things to cooking is really just being aware, really being present with the food. Not walking away too much, unless of course you're doing a simmer. But that's how you avoid burning things or cooking things, just like being in it. Having fun, like talking to it. You're part of the experience just as much as the food is. I am so excited about this. I mean, how freaking good does that look already? What? Now at this point, I'm gonna add my paprika. Not all of it, but maybe a tablespoon or so. Kind of feel it out. The more you like, the merrier you are. Oh, right when that hits, it's just like, whoo! Look at that. That is, that just changes the smell. It changes the color as well. And I do hope that you try to make this because, listen, whatever ingredients you have, whatever version, like most of the stuff in here is very easy to get. There's a couple things that, maybe you don't have, but listen, if you don't have, you don't know. So you're still gonna be good. In goes the tomato. The tomato is the first ingredient that's gonna have a little bit of liquid. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna help get some of these bits off the bottom, maybe a little bit, but it's also gonna kind of bring everything together. Scraping it off as the stuff steams up. All right, now we add in our stock. You see the saffron's in there already. And I'm gonna add it all. And if I need more, that's okay, because I'm gonna eyeball the rice a little bit. And what that's gonna allow me to do is like, of course you could measure it and make your life a little bit easier, but what I'm gonna have to just be careful about is the liquid. So if I need to keep adding a little bit more liquid, I have more stock reserved. But what I want to do now before I add any rice is just bring this up to a boil. And then what's basically going to happen is I'm going to just keep tasting it and make sure this tastes amazing. Because the rice is going to soak up all this magic. You want to make sure it tastes good. So while it's coming to a boil, I'm just going to throw in some rosemary. It's tasting fantastic. You go in with the rice. I'm going to mix it around first and kind of see how the rice is looking in there. This is a very rice-laden dish, you know what I'm saying? Now I just want to bring this up to a boil and let this boil for a little while. And you don't want to necessarily be moving it around too much. If you move the rice around too much, it's going to release a lot of the starch. At least that's what they tell me. I'm just going to take my cover off for a minute. I'm going to lay these shrimp down on here. Shrimp can just kind of steam on the top. La da da da. Woo. The shrimp, nice and cooked. You could, of course, mix them in if you want, but I thought it'd be kind of fun to put them on top. Now, I will say I went pretty aggressive on the amount of rice, but it still turned out okay. I was a little worried. With paella, you don't want it to be like super soupy. You want everything to be cooked up into the rice. You have a tiny bit of sauce, but it's not really a saucy dish. So I want to make sure I cook out pretty much all the liquid. And I'm starting to smell a little tiny bit of that burnness. If you get a little bit, you can always back off the heat. But keep in mind that the bottom is going to crisp up, and that's a lot of flavor down there. Down in the abyss of deliciousness. And just like that, we have our beautiful freaking paella. Wow. Get some kind of spatula and make sure you get off the crispy bits on the bottom. Oh, don't forget the shrimp. Oh my God. What? Oh, that's a rabbit. Wow. It's like chicken, but also not. It's almost like chicken meets pork. Now that the traditional paella is done, I want to show you more of a budget, but also just more of like an accessible one that you can make with whatever you got. For my budget paella, I actually kind of wanted to keep this on the vegetarian, vegan side. You obviously do not have to. You can use whatever you want. Use whatever you got, but here's a few things I want to show you. So when it comes to rice, short grain is the key. It is the hero of heroes. It is the champion of champion. And if you can't get short grain, that's okay. Get a medium grain. I'm using just some peas, whatever you got. We're going to use mushrooms instead of meat. So I'm using a cast iron pan. If you don't, use whatever pan you have, but it's a heavy bottom pan. You cook it over a fire. But it's also going to help us get like a nice crisp on the bottom and really maintain heat well. This is the only sort of, in the budget realm, this is the only thing that's a little more expensive, but if you have one, use it. If you don't, use whatever you got. Work what you got, people. Alas, I almost forgot this stuff. So obviously if you don't have this, it's not a big deal, but this is a very popular sort of all-purpose paella seasoning. So you can order this online if you don't want to get saffron, because obviously saffron's expensive, and paprika. So this is just a great kind of little packet you can have. You kind of break these up actually. You can cut them, like have fun. It's kind of like mimicking meat, and meat is never like perfect, Cast iron is hot, feeling hot, hot, hot. Oh wow, that is shimmering. Dang, it's hot. Hit them with a little saltita. Okay, these are starting to break down. I'm gonna let them cook a little bit more, because they're still gonna cook once everything, the rice is in and stuff. All right, these are starting to look pretty good, I would say. Pretty good. Get them out. Some oil. Onions right in the big shebang. Let them saute a bit. Mr. Garlic, and I'm using a lot of garlic. I mean, it's relative. I'm actually gonna turn the heat off because this cast iron is so hot. I just want the garlic. I don't want the garlic to burn, obviously. You probably hear that all the time in cooking shows. You don't want the garlic to burn. No. I'm gonna add in some peas. There's a little bit of corn that snuck its way in there. Mix that around. And then my tomato. Wow. Now once this is kind of cooking up, smoked paprika goes in. Again, totally optional, but I'm gonna use a little bit of my seasoning packet. Now I'm gonna go back in with my mushrooms. Now at this point, you could either add some kind of stock, veggie stock, of course, you could have chicken if you want. But I bought stock and it was bad, so to me it was a sign. For some reason, like it was already pre-opened. That's bastards! So to me it was a sign that I should use not stock, but water. So you can use the water, that's the budgetist way to go. And then what we're gonna do here is we're gonna cook this just for a little bit, and we wanna make sure this tastes freaking amazing. If it doesn't, you can add more seasoning. You can add some rosemary in there. Oh man, that smell is insanity! Insanity! When you make a dish, it's freaking good, insanity! Okay, now let's sprinkle the rice in. In terms of how much rice to use, I don't really know, but I'm gonna eyeball it, kind of mix it around, see how it looks. So at this point, just let it sit and let it boil and cook for a while. This thing's rumbling away. I'm just gonna give it a little bit of a cover. You don't need to. Some recipes do, some don't. But use your intuition. Try things out. If you don't get it perfect the first time, it's okay. Biggest thing is just don't burn your food and you'll get something good. I'm gonna give this a little check. Let's see. That's just kind of helping it steam. I took out all the rosemary. What I'm noticing is the rice needs a little bit more time. I'm gonna let it cook and cover just for a few minutes. On extremely low, just to get out any last bits of liquid. I don't want to be in there. If there's a little bit of liquid, it's fine. And you take a taste. Vegetarian paella. Oh yeah, and corn. Great winter food. Comforting, hearty. Throw whatever you got in. Overall, both dishes are really good. I like the traditional a bit better. I think just because like that umami broth, and with the lemon, just like eating that with the rice, like I just could not stop eating it. And the rabbit was delicious. That blew me away. If you can't get rabbit, of course, that is okay. I found it frozen at a Chinese market. But the vegetarian was also really good. And the mushrooms were really meaty. There was a lot of good umami thanks to the tomatoes and the mushrooms. And you could, of course, add whatever you want. To me, this series is all about getting you inspired to get in the kitchen, to try something new, through tasting things around the world maybe you've never been to, but maybe you can learn new techniques, have fun, be inspired to do something different.